All right, we're still talking about what's in your hands, and we've looked at giving out of obedience, giving out of abundance, giving out of need. What's left? Well, today we're going to talk about who you know and what you know, because that is also something you can give. So we're going to start with Naaman. Naaman was amazing. He was like the captain of the army. He was a big guy. He'd won a lot of battles. He had conquered so many cities. And in fact, one of the cities he had conquered was Samaria. And when they conquered it, they took captives, and he took captive this young girl. Yeah, ripped her away from her family, took him back, and made her a servant in his house. And she was a servant and waited on his wife and took care of her. But the thing is, instead of her holding bitterness and anger and hurt and resentment in her heart, she looked at her master with compassion. Her master had leprosy, and she knew a man of God, a prophet, Elisha. And she thought, what if my master could only know Elisha? He would heal him. And so she told the mistress, and she told her husband, Naaman. And Naaman went to the king, and the king wrote a letter and sent all this gold and gifts and stuff to say to the man of God, please heal this guy. He's my main guy. So Naaman goes, and he meets Elisha. Now, Naaman would have never even known about Elisha except for his servant girl. And she was so insignificant in the house. She was just a servant girl for his wife. But she knew someone. And she knew that he was a man of God, and she knew about the miracles. So see, sometimes you may feel like you're very small and insignificant next to the person who's beside you, but you may know something. And if you know the God of heaven, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, well, then you definitely know the right person. So anyway, he went and he tried to give all the gold. And Elisha never even came out to meet him. And he was so insulted. And he was like, do you know who I am? You know what? Sometimes I think we get hung up on who we are. And do people know who we are? And they haven't given us the proper respect. You know what, though? Knowing who you are in Christ, knowing that you're his son or his daughter, that's the most important part of your identity. Anyway, Elisha said, go wash in the river Jordan 7 times and you'll be healed. And he was like, that is a dirty, disgusting place. And his servant said, not the girl, his servant. He said, look, master, if he'd have asked you to do a hard thing, wouldn't you have done it? And so at least let's try. So he did it. Of course, he was healed. But we see the healing only came because of the servant girl giving what was in her hand. All right, let's look at another person who was taken into captivity, Daniel. So Daniel was also taken into captivity at a young age. And we see how God raised him up, and he influenced 5 different kings. Yes, amazing. So we see that because from an early age, Daniel said, I am going to do what I know is right in the sight of the Lord. I'm going to pray. I'm not going to eat these certain foods, but I'm going to honor God. And because he did that, God elevated him. All right, the last one we're going to look at, Esther. Esther. Who did Esther know? Who did Esther have access to? The king, of course. But you know what? Who else did Esther have access to? A whole nation of Jewish people. And before Esther went to the king, it was a big, bold step, right? If the king didn't reach out his hand and say, come, she'd be killed. But before she did that, what did she do? She took access of this whole nation of people and said, will you fast and pray for me 3 days before I go? And that is something, that when you have, and you may not have a whole nation that's going to pray for you, but when you have a prayer support group or a body in the local church or a close group of friends, and they will commit to pray for you, that is significant, especially when it's your hour of need. Have you ever been in that place where it's just like such an intense moment and you feel like you're totally alone, but then you can call somebody and they're going to pray with you, and in that moment you're like, oh, I'm not alone. Yes, who we know and what we know whose we are in Christ. Going the second mile, I want to encourage you, just like these 3 people, don't let hurt or betrayal or even fear, which are emotions that all 3 of these people could have felt, don't let those keep you from using what's in your hand, because God always wants to multiply the gifts that he's given you for his kingdom.